Please like the video and share it so that it reaches many more people and you get sawaba, or rewards from Allah. This could be a sawabe jariyah or continuous reward for you long after you are gone.
Volume 7, Book 70, number 562. Narrated by Aisha. During the ailment of the Prophet, some people came to visit him. He led them in prayer while sitting, but they prayed standing, so he waved to them to sit down. When he had finished the prayer, he said, "An imam is to be followed, so when he bows, you should bow. And when he raises his head, you should raise yours, and if he prays sitting, you should pray sitting." Abu Abdullah said Al-Humaydi said, "The order of this narration has been abrogated by the last action of the Prophet as he led the prayer sitting, while the people prayed standing behind him." Volume 7, Book 70, number 563. Narrated by Sa'd. I became seriously ill at Mecca and the Prophet came to visit me. I said, "O Allah's Apostle, I shall leave behind me a good fortune, but my heir is my only daughter. Shall I bequeath 2/3 of my property to be spent in charity and leave 1/3 for my heir?" He said, "No." I said, "Shall I bequeath half and leave half?" He said, "No." I said, "Shall I bequeath 1/3 and leave 2/3? He said, "1/3 is all right, though even 1/3 is too much." Then he placed his hand on his forehead and passed it over my face and abdomen and said, "O Allah, cure Sa'd and complete his emigration. I feel as if I have been feeling the coldness of his hand on my liver ever since." Volume 7, Book 70, number 564. Narrated by Abdullah bin Mas'ud. I visited Allah's Apostle while he was suffering from a high fever. I touched him with my hand and said, "O Allah's Apostle, you have a high fever." Allah's Apostle said, "Yes, I have as much fever as 2 men of you have." I said, "Is it because you will get a double reward?" Allah's Apostle said, "Yes, no Muslim is afflicted with harm because of sickness or some other inconvenience, but that Allah will remove his sins for him as a tree sheds its leaves." Volume 7, Book 70, number 565. Narrated by Abdullah. I visited the Prophet during his illness and touched him while he was having a fever. I said to him, "You have a high fever. Is it because you will get a double reward?" He said, "Yes. No Muslim is afflicted with any harm, but that his sins will be annulled as the leaf of a tree fall down." Volume 7, Book 70, number 566. Narrated by Ibn Abbas. Allah's Apostle entered upon sick man to pay him a visit, and said to him, "Don't worry, Allah willing, your sickness will be an expiation for your sins." The man said, "No, it is but a fever that is boiling within an old man and will send him to his grave." On that, the Prophet said, "Then yes, it is so." Volume 7, Book 70, number 567. Narrated by Osama bin Zaid. The Prophet rode a donkey having a saddle with a fadakiyah velvet covering. He mounted me behind him and went to visit Sa'd bin Ubadah, and that had been before the Battle of Badr. The Prophet proceeded till he passed by a gathering in which Abdullah bin Ubay bin Salul was present, and that had been before Abdullah embraced Islam. The gathering comprised of Muslims, polytheists, i.e., isolators, and Jews. Abdullah bin Rawaha was also present in that gathering. When dust raised by the donkey covered the gathering, Abdullah bin Ubay covered his nose with his upper garment and said, "Do not trouble us with dust." The Prophet greeted them, stopped and dismounted. Then he invited them to Allah, i.e., to embrace Islam, and recited to them some verses of the Holy Quran. On that, Abdullah bin Ubay said, "O man, there is nothing better than what you say if it is true. Do not trouble us with it in our gathering, but return to your house, and if somebody comes to you, teach him there." On that, Abdullah bin Rawaha said, "Yes, O Allah's Apostle. Bring your teachings to our gathering, for we love that." So the Muslims, the pagans and the Jews started abusing each other till they were about to fight. The Prophet kept on quietening them till they became calm. Thereupon the Prophet mounted his animal and proceeded till he entered upon Sa'd bin Ubadah. He said to him, "O Sa'd, have you not heard what Abu Hubab, i.e., Abdullah bin Ubay, said?" Sa'd said, "O Allah's Apostle, excuse and forgive him, for Allah has given you what he has given you." The people of this town, Medina, decided unanimously to crown him and make him their chief by placing a turban on his head, but when that was prevented by the truth which Allah had given you, he, Abdullah bin Ubay, was grieved out of jealousy, and that was the reason which caused him to behave in the way you have seen. Volume 7, Book 70, number 568. Narrated by Jabir. The Prophet came to visit me while I was sick, and he was riding neither a mule nor a horse. Volume 7, Book 70, number 569. Narrated by Kabib bin Ajara. The Prophet passed by me while I was kindling a fire under a cooking pot. He said, "Do the lice of your head trouble you?" I said, "Yes." So he called a barber to shave my head and ordered me to make expiation for that. Volume 7, Book 70, number 570. Narrated by Al-Qasim bin Muhammad. Aisha, complaining of headache, said, "Oh, my head." Allah's Apostle said, "I wish that had happened while I was still living, for then I would ask Allah's forgiveness for you and invoke Allah for you." Aisha said, "Wa thuklaya, by Allah, I think you want me to die. And if this should happen, you would spend the last part of the day sleeping with one of your wives." The Prophet said, "Nay, I should say, O my head." I felt like sending for Abu Bakr and his son, and appoint him as my successor, lest some people claimed something or some others wished something. But then I said to myself, Allah would not allow it to be otherwise, and the Muslims would prevent it to be otherwise. Volume 7, Book 70, number 571. Narrated by Ibn Mas'ud. I visited the Prophet while he was having a high fever. I touched him and said, "You have a very high fever." He said, "Yes, as much fever as 2 of you may have." I said, "You will have a double reward." He said, "Yes, no Muslim is afflicted with hurt caused by disease or some other inconvenience, but that Allah will remove his sins as a tree sheds its leaves." Volume 7, Book 70, number 572. Narrated by Sa'd. Allah's Apostle came to visit me during my ailment, which had been aggravated during Hajjat al-Wada. I said to him, "You see how sick I am. I have much property but have no heir except my only daughter. May I give 2/3 of my property in charity?" He said, "No." I said, "Half of it?" He said, "No." I said, "1/3. He said, "1/3 is too much, for to leave your heirs rich is better than to leave them poor, begging of others. Nothing you spend seeking Allah's pleasure, but you shall get a reward for it, even for what you put in the mouth of your wife."
أشهد أن